Thank you very much again. Silverstein, to everybody here in the Kehillah. I find that just when I start to think about coming here, all sorts of ideas and machshavas start bubbling up, and they're part of Verove. They grow in the schus of the tzibur. So we'll try. I'll preface saying a lot of what I'm going to say today is based on things both from Moshe Shapiro Zatzal and Yibodel L'Chaim, Rabbi Yonasan David Shlita, without being able to delineate each time who I'm quoting from. It kind of blend through together. The avoda of the 3 weeks, the 9 days of Tisha B'av is really different in kind than the other Tanesim that we have. Right? In other words, the Rambam says that the 4 Tanesim that we have, because of the Churban, the purpose is to be ma'ora us to tshuva, right? To awaken us. Nothing gets our attention like not being able to put the spoon in the bowl or the fork in the plate. It gets our attention, it wakes us up, and it's supposed to cause us to do tshuva. But if we look, the tshuva on Tisha B'av takes a different form. We don't do the same things. We don't have slichas on Tisha B'av. We don't say Tachanun on Tisha B'av. We don't say Avinu Malkeinu on Tisha B'av. These are usually the kelim with which we do tshuva. This helps to signal to us that on Tisha B'av, things are different. They're a different form, a different type of tshuva. We also expressed on these days an inyan of avelus. What type of avelus is it, and how is it different than that of the other days as well? So Moshe Shapiro pointed out just from one simple halacha. This Isser that we have, at least for Bnei Ashkenaz, in the whole 9 days of eating meat and drinking wine, is not something that a regular Ovel has. An Ovel who's sitting Shiva can eat meat and drink wine. Right? So what is this Avelus? This Avelus is the status that Chazal described as Meso Mutal Lefana, that the one who has died is right here in front of you. What we call Aninus, this deepest stage of Avelus. Now we have to try to get to the bottom then of what that status of Meso Mutal Lefanov is. What is it that a person sees with Meso Mutal Lefanov? Why and how does that affect us, and what is it supposed to bring it to? So, first of all, we should know that Am Yisrael aren't afraid, so to speak, of a dead body. Right? This is something people tend to have these nervous things. One of the most beautiful stories, the last moments of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, that he was in a certain town, Königsberg, I think, where he's buried, and he didn't have his whole community with him. Some of his Talmidim came to be with him. He was sick, and they had hired an old man from the community to take the middle of the night shift, right? From 1 o'clock or something, so that the Talmidim could get a bit of rest. And they came in the morning, and the man said, "I'm sorry to tell you, your Rebbe passed away at night." And they, first of all, just felt terrible that they had lost the Rebbe, but also that they had missed his last minutes in the world. Many times, very big people in their last minutes, their avodah is something very unusual, or they give very special messages, they're megala things. And they start to ask him, what was it like? What was his video like? What was his Kriya Shema like? And he says, I was a little bit surprised because I knew he's a big rabbi. I thought he would do all those things. He didn't do any of that. He just kept going on and on, telling me it's such a silly thing that people are afraid of dead bodies. A body is a kli that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. The neshama utilizes it in the world to do what it has to do. And then the neshama separates in its return. He said there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's what he talked about till his last breath. And the Talmidim looked at each other and they said, that's what he saw. As you saw. In other words, there was an old man here who was obligated to stay with a dead body. He had a few minutes of life left. He had a few breaths. Rather than say Kriya Shema, rather than say Vidui, he did everything he could to make sure this man wouldn't be frightened, that he wouldn't be sitting there in fear and horror having to be with that dead body. So we don't have such a fear and horror of it. What is it we see when we see Meso Mutal Lefanov? One of the words which is used for dead body, the Tanakh and Halacha, is a hollow. Libi al halaleim. A hollow means an empty space. The neshama fills the guf, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu fills the world, say Chazal, like the neshama fills the guf. When the neshama leaves the guf, so we're seeing a hollow, we're seeing emptiness. And that is the powerful effect of Meso Mutolafona. When it comes to both people and to the Beis HaMikdash, Am Yisrael have a different view than the other nations of the world. The Torah reminds us, Bani matem LaHashem Elokechem, you are children to Hashem your God. Lo tisgodedu, don't cut yourselves. Lo tasimu karacha b'neinechem l'meis, and don't pull out your hair in mourning over a dead person. Rashi says that the nations around, that's how they used to express their mourning. They would cut themselves till they bled. They would tear their hair out. So the Rishonim speak about why this particular introduction, Bani matem LaHashem Elokechem, and what the message is to us. So one approach is that they forget Hash'aras HaNefesh, meaning it's true. Our mourning is crying that we do when we part from someone. That's the Ramban's lashon. A person who's become distant from us. The despair that would bring a person to self-mutilation and self-harm and all those things, it comes from the sense that the person no longer exists. We know that that's not true. The person exists, but is far from us. So too, at the Churban, the non-Jewish narrative is, right, that the Jews were rejected by Hashem. They're never going to return. They're never going to have a Beis HaMikdash. Whereas we know that that's not true. We know that he's Osit Lignosa. It's going to be rebuilt. So why are you crying? Because it's far away from me, that which can console me and bring my life back. But that's why I cry, because I know it's there. I know that it's alive. The famous explanation of Chazal's use of the present tense. Kol hamis'abel al Yerushalayim zoche v'ro b'vinyona. Right? Why not Yizke v'yireh? Is it not a promise to say, in the merit of having mourned for Yerushalayim, you will get to see it rebuilt? No. Many people say, I think Rabbi Tzalon Mivolozhin uses this lashon, he says, it means if you are able to mourn, that means that you see Yerushalayim b'vinyana now. Because you know that it's a reality, you know that it should be here, and it's not. You're looking at the hollow. That means it's real for you. A person who sees that is able to be misabel. Otherwise, over time, if it was just gone, we wouldn't be able to keep up the avelis. It just goes. It wears out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a teva, shames mishtakach min alev, right? That even the person who's dead, that really is neshama, is still alive. He helps us forget in a certain way so that we can function. But as they point out, Yaakov wouldn't take nechama when he felt that Yosef was dead. And he asked, why didn't the Gezerah, that after a year, the Meis Mishtakach Min Alev, why didn't it come into play? Because he wasn't dead. So the Gezerah wouldn't be. So they say also with Am Yisrael, with the Churban, how are we able to mourn for thousands of years? Because we're not mourning something which is dead. We're mourning something which exists, but is distant from us. Okay, so that is what we're trying to see. When we go back to the events of the Churban, we see that message of what we're missing, and that can then lead us to the particular tshuva we're supposed to be doing on Tisha B'av. The Gemara tells us that Titus came into the Beis HaMikdash, and part of what he did was he stuck his sword, he stabbed the parochas, and a nes happened, and blood poured from the parochas. Titus, they said, he felt savar haragas atzmo, right? That's what's called the lashon saginor, right? That he felt that he had killed, right, the master of the world, right? They phrased it as if he had killed himself. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu do such a nes? So the Maharal explains that there's two aspects to it. Number one, it's true. This leads Titus to be able to exult in his victory and is part of the chilul that happens On the other hand, it was a message to Am Yisrael. They were saying what did exist here was a chibur to true life. What is blood? Blood is that which brings the life force through every part of our body. If a person ties something very tight around their finger for a long time, that part of the finger becomes dead because the blood can't reach it anymore. Okay, so the Beis Hamikdash was that which connected. The Paroches was something which separated us from the Kodesh Kodashim, but also enabled us to be connected to the Kodesh Kodesh. The whole Beis Hamikdash is made up of mechitzas, which are walls and curtains that divide, but those also gave a keli for Hashem's presence to come into the world and to bring life into the entire world, to bring a different type of life in the entire world. That was what we had. That was what was there. Ramon Shapira asked, why did Chazal bother to write down the insane ravings of Titus Arash? Why did they write these things? It wasn't just a record of history. He says, Titus filled the cholol with his words. Words are something that create a reality, right? Part of the roots of the Churban was from Chet HaMeradlim. And it says that the Meradlim, higdinu pel la'ayin. They said things with their mouth that weren't real, that the eye could see if it was looking true, but after they said it, the eye saw it. We live in a world that was created by the mouth of Titus, and we see his world, a world of disconnect, a world that says, Kaviyachol, he's finished. He's no longer here. That's not it. That's what fills the cholol. And there's a reason why that's particularly horrifying. I have to always have something a little bit strange, an interesting chakira. Around the world, right, there are different things that people are afraid of. One thing universally people are afraid of is the concept of what's called the living dead. Sometimes people would call it a zombie, meaning if a person who's dead suddenly gets up and starts walking, everyone runs and screams. Official Schefter tells this joke about a guy who's in a Beis HaChaim and suddenly sees someone in a kittel walking across and starts to scream. The man says, don't worry, when I was alive, I was also afraid of it. But there's something horrifying. Why is this horrifying? And here's the other side of the Hakira. We're all waiting very much for Tchias HaMesim. Nothing horrifying about Tchias HaMesim, right? Well, the famous Mordechai ben David song, someday we will all be, they say, Avraham and Yitzchak will be there to greet us. Nobody's running screaming away when Avraham and Yitzchak are there to greet us. What's the difference between the two? What's these living dead and what's Tchias HaMesim? So the answer is that what we're seeing here is a sheker, a lie, meaning someone who's really, really supposed to be dead. That's one of the few things we know are a fact of life. Somebody said death and taxes, right, are things you can't avoid. Is there. When he's dead, he's dead. It's over. So if that person suddenly starts moving with the movements of life, even if he's not doing something threatening or attacking us, maybe you're sitting at a levaya and somebody said a very nice hesped, and the nifter just got up to applaud for a little bit because he should. Everybody would run out screaming. Why? Because that shouldn't be. That shakes it. Rabbeinu Yonah says, "Emes miyesodei hanefesh." Our operating system is emes, is things that are real, that are true, that are should be. And this is like the ultimate sheker, something which is dead but is moving like alive. That throws us off entirely. This world that we live in, the world of Titus's ravings, is a world which is dead but alive. And it's supposed to fill us with horror. Chazal say, Rishoyim b'chayeyim nikroim mesim. When Russia, even when he's alive, he's called dead. Why? Because he's not connected to true life. He's not connected to emes. He's moving, he's living, he's doing, but it's not the true reality. We're supposed to see that and to sense it. Chazal said that really, after the Churban, we shouldn't eat meat, we shouldn't drink wine, we shouldn't even get married and have children. What would be the problem? They said, Nimsa Zaru Shel Avraham Avinu Kala. If we did that, the descendants of Avraham Avinu would die out, so we can't do that. What was the Havamina? Well, obviously that would end the Jewish nation. Why would we think of doing something like that? The answer is that we're supposed to realize that this is not the world for Avraham Avinu Zerah to function in. This is not the world that he was sent to, Lech Lecha. It's a false world. It's a world of a chalal that was filled with something which is false, which comes from someplace else. And our avoda is to recognize that and to see it and to sense the horror of that and look at it at that time. This is the impetus that's supposed to change us. It's supposed to get us to the particular type of tshuva that's supposed to happen. Yonasan David describes how after the Churban, so again, everything which was there was real, and yet it just doesn't exist in this world. Titus, who glorified himself for having destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, Abaskol came down and said that you're arrogant about this. Kamcha techino katochant. You ground flour which has already been ground. Bai surf sarafta. You burnt the house that was already burnt. Meaning, the Nefesh HaChaim explains, no goy can destroy a Beis Hamikdash. He has no power to do that. Only Jews can destroy the Beis Hamikdash. When Am Yisrael sunk to such a low level that they were no longer deserving of having a Beis Hamikdash in this world, so the essence of the Beis Hamikdash, Asheras HaShechina, departed. Titus only burnt the shell. The Beis Hamikdash was gone before he set fire to it. It's a beautiful explanation in the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan, not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the time of the Churban, or later Amora, Rabbi Yochanan said, if I had been there, I would have made the Tainus on the 10th of Av. And if someone studies the chronology of the Churban, that makes sense. Because they only set fire to the Beis Hamikdash toward the end of Tisha B'av, and it burned on the 10th. Right? That's why we still continue on some things till Chatzos. So, told the Rebbe Shlita asked him, was he criticizing Chazal? Was he saying they got it wrong? He said, no, he was criticizing himself. He says, if I had been there, I would have been distracted by the burning building. And I would have said, that's the Churban. The Chachamim at the time were wiser than me. They said, that's not the Churban. The Churban's on the night, when you lost the ability to have the Beis Hamikdash in this world. And that Kedusha went back to its place. Chazal described the stations of the Shechina leaving Am Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu then enters a mode which Chazal called Mikamocha Ba'ilmim, of silence. Right? After Titus did all these things, it says in the Gemara, Mikamocha Ba'ilmim Hashem, who is like you, who is silent, who doesn't speak, that he could do such chilul in the Beis Hamikdash and no reaction. In that time of silence, Yonasan said it's not a passive silence. It's back into the world of machshava. It's back into the initial world of ha'aretz ha'isatov avo v'choshech al pnei tehom, but ruach elokim chefes al pnei hamayim. Chazal say the tov avo v'choshech al pnei tehom represents the four malchios, the four kingdoms that if Am Yisrael go wrong, they have to struggle with and overcome those four golios, those four exiles, those four nations, the last of which is Rome, which we're still struggling with. And then Ruach Elokim Rachefes al Pnei Hamayim, Ruach Elokim this is the Ruach of Mashiach, al Pnei Hamayim, based on the tshuva of Am Yisrael. As the Pasuk says, Shifchi Kamayim Libech. So there's an idea of going back to the extent that the world is now tohu vavohu. You're now under the rule of this malchus. But Ruach Elokim is there. Al Pnei Hamayim. If you do the right type of tshuva, why mayim? Why particularly that avodah of shifchi kamayim libech? So mayim has two properties. Number one, mayim cleanses. Mayim erases. And mayim also is something that has no inherent surah, no inherent form. You put it in a round bottle, it's round. You put it in a square bottle, it's square. Mayim doesn't change this. There's a principle called Tzru'os Elokim, gives strength to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we look at this world that we live in, and we say that this is not our world, this is not a world of emes, it's not a world that's even alive. That statement with the two mothers in Shlomo HaMelech, Lo ki b'neicha mesu v'ni achai. That's the battle that's going on. There's a tremendous voice in the world that says, this is the reality. And you people are living something that died. Many people view the Jews like that. Something died long ago, and somehow you keep on doing this. And we have to stand up and say, Lo ki b'neicha mesu v'ni achai. This world that you created in this hollow, in this empty space of the Mikdash, that's dead. But it's horrifying to us because it's moving and it seems to be alive. And that is the avoda that we have to do. Shifchi kamayim libech. We have to cleanse it with our tears and say, this is not the world that we're supposed to be living in. We have to have the principle of water, that we are immediately able to shift our tzura, that we are willing to live in the tzura which is emes. We're willing to live in the world which is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it, and that we're not drawing our chiyus, our life force, from this living dead world that we're surrounded in. That's the particular avoda that we have and that we're supposed to be doing at the time. Chazal said, Misha ein bo deya, yilu beis hamikdash nechrav b'yom. A person doesn't have deya. Now, we always know that the word deya doesn't mean just intellectual knowledge. It means connection. It means connection, like Vayeda Adam Eschava Ishto, to truly unify with something. If you can live in this world now, and you don't have deya, you're not connected to the true world, so it's as if the Churban happened in your lifetime. Because what you're doing is you're filling that empty space, not with the truth, but with the false. You're going to connect to one or to the other. There is no in between. Either you're connected to the emes or you're connected to the sheker. When a person cries in the world of sheker, meso muto lefanov, they see a world which is really a world of death. It's alive. And the world that's of true life, Beis Chayenu, we don't see it in front of us in a tangible, living way. That's what motivates our cries. That's what motivates that particular type of tshuva which is there. This is a call which can overcome what's called kol hamona shoromi. What keeps our world going? Chazal use an expression, it's called the sound of the multitude of Rome. Chazal say that if it were not for the sound of the multitude of Rome, we would hear the sun saying, Hashamayim, Shamayim, Hashem. That's what the world really says and does and expresses. But there's interference. There's another voice which is drowning it out. Rashi says, Kol Amona Shoromi B'Tzalasam, V'Nitzchana, in their sense of victory and exultation, that they have the world, and in this world, they're masters. It's the world of falsehood that they created. And because it's their creation, in that world, they seem to rule. We have to erase that world. Just as Yaakov Avinu said, when he was in Beis Kel, he said, Ein zeh ki'im beis Elokim v'zeh shar hashamayim. The Sfas Emes said that Ein zeh is very important, because Yaakov Avinu wasn't looking at a Beis HaMikdash. There had never even been a Beis HaMikdash built there. If we were looking from a satellite at what Yaakov Avinu was seeing, he was probably seeing some kind of hill with some sheep grazing on it or some Bedouins rocking around. And he said, Ein zeh. That is not what it really is truly. This is Beis Elokim v'zeh shar hashamayim. Our avodah on Tisha B'av is an avodah of Ein zeh. If we're able to do that, if our tears are able to clean the screen, are able to get us to see properly, and then we align ourselves with the true existence, then already at Chatzos in Tisha B'av, the turnaround comes. The birth of Mashiach the machshavas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has always of the geula, of the tachlis, come into motion, start happening. And that's how we're able to truly connect. Tisha B'av is not a passive time, right? We tend to, it's very hard. It's very hard. It's a long day, and we don't know what to do with ourselves. And a friend of mine, he said his brother was once in Belgium, Tisha B'av, not one of the countries you want to be in on Tisha B'av, because it finishes very, very late. Australia is a great place to be for Tisha B'av, right? Very short. So he said he called his brother after the fast year. His brother told him, he said, I slept for 4 hours. I read 2 Holocaust books, and I still have 4 hours to go. It's really long. And the person, what do you do? But it's not just something that you're supposed to pass the time. It's not a punishment that you're supposed to suffer. Many people get very bitter about that. As the headache and the stomach ache kicks in, they say, listen, I didn't destroy the Beis Hamikdash, okay? I wasn't there 2,000 years ago. Why do I have to fast? People get upset. There's an avoda of it which is active. It's really changing the way that you see the world. It's seeing what was and what should be. It's seeing what shouldn't be yet is, and also seeing what will be because it must be. These are the stages of the avoda that we go through on Tisha B'av, from the tears and the kinnis and the nechama, leading to that birth. Shifchi kamayim libech, but as the pasuk continues, nochaf pnei Hashem. If we pour out those tears in the right way, then we're close to Hashem. We're there. Then we see who we are, who the world is. And just as the false words of the Meraglim created a false existence, and the false words of Titus creating a false existence, our words of truth on Tisha B'av, and our thoughts of truth, and our seeing truth, will Hashem create a world of truth.